Live from the SABC's Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, welcome to this Wednesday edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko, and on the show tonight, the health department opens up on the new measles outbreak. 137 cases in 4 provinces, and the number is rising. Should we be worried?
Due to the long history and complexity of the matter, President Ramaphosa took time to carefully consider all the permutations of the JSC recommendations, including obtaining guidance from an independent legal opinion.
President Cyril Ramaphosa suspends Cape Judge President John Hlophe.
I didn't defy the party. I voted as a public representative.
Then I get a message to say, look, you and Zweli, I think it's floating around. You and Zweli are being targeted.
Ramaphosa's political rivals, meanwhile, open up about why they didn't follow the party line yesterday in Parliament and why they are adamant he should go. We'll also get reflections from the woman who will be carrying the ANC's youth aspirations at the weekend conference, and that's Youth Task Team convener Nongeba Mhlauli. The Watchdog starts now. We'll start with that story. President Cyril Ramaphosa announcing today that he has suspended Justice John Hlophe, President of the Western Cape High Court Division, pending a decision of the National Assembly. The presidency says the move was influenced by advice from the Judicial Services Commission and in terms of Section 177 of the Constitution. My guest for this conversation is Mpumelelo Zikalala, who joins us from Durban. Mpumelelo, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. It's been a long time coming.
Definitely. I think from the start of the process, plus minus about a decade ago, if I'm not mistaken, and from the time in which the JSC recommended that the Judge President, Judge Hlophe, be impeached, so to say, it was 5 months ago. So it has taken a bit of time even for the president to decide that, yes, indeed, I must suspend him, and also for the process of the National Assembly to even begin.
Of course, I mean, there are those who are already attaching, some political connotations, lots of insinuations, lots of suggestions, other people suspicious as to the timing of this whole thing. But take us back, I mean, if you will. In essence, the Western Cape Judge President is being accused of trying to influence other judges. There were, 11 judges actually complained. And as you go, as you were saying, this has been going on for about a decade now.
Definitely, and it's certainly been a matter that has been sitting with the JSC for quite some time. A subcommittee of the JSC, which strictly looks at disciplinary proceedings and all the other complaints against judges, has sat down and listened to evidence and has analyzed evidence, and on their basis and their recommendations to the JSC, then said we indeed find the Judge Hlophe to be guilty of misconduct, and we recommend that he now be removed or taken off as being a judge at the end of the day. Now, they do understand that there's not a prerogative in which they have. However, they have very strong recommendation powers, which is to the president. Now, using Section 177, then the president is recommended to the president that please remove Judge Hlophe. He has misconducted himself or performed in certain instances or acts which are against what an honorable judge should do. And on that basis, please remove him. Now, between that process, because You can't just do it willy-nilly as a president. You still have to go to the National Assembly, and you need a 2/3 majority before that is done. That's the process in which the president has embarked on. However, there is a section within the Constitution that says, while the impeachment process or the process of removing the judge is taking place, you do have the prerogative as the president to suspend the judge pending the finalization of the process that is going to be undertaken by the National Assembly.
Of course, I mean, the infamous words are "sesithembele and these are the words that Judge Hlophe allegedly uttered, and that he did try to influence Constitutional Court Justices Bess Ngabinde and Chris Jafta to violate their oaths of office, and also to find in former President Jacob Zuma's favor. This is, of course, on the tint corruption matter.
And you see exactly what was happening yesterday in terms of the members of parliament voting is going to happen again in this case, in which those members of parliament will have to decide, should the word "sesithembele warrant a judge or a judge president to be removed? What did that insinuate? Is there a proper report is going to be tabled within the National Assembly? Are they going to be privy with all the other processes that they should start so that they're able to make a much more informed decision? So at the end of the day, it's those members of parliament that will have to say, I vote yes or I vote no to the words as to exactly what do they mean within this particular context. At the end of the day, they'll take the decision, and the Constitution is very strict on this one. It does not rely on a majority; it relies strictly on a 2/3 basis. So it helps to be the ruling party and all the other parties that are there in order for Judge Hlophe to be impeached.
Of course, I mean, and the accusations are quite serious because the Judicial Conduct Tribunal apparently established that Judge Hlophe's behavior seriously threatened and interfered with the independence, the impartiality, the dignity, and effectiveness of the Constitutional Court, and that his actions undermined public confidence in the judicial system. It really gets more serious than that, doesn't it?
Definitely, and it actually threatens the integrity of the judiciary and what judiciary should then represent, and the element of trust in which the public should have in the judiciary. However, take note with the utterances that have been stated by a number of parliamentarians when it comes to how the judiciary is, how independent is the judiciary. So I don't think it's going to be a walk in the park in which all the members of the National Assembly will simply say, we simply trust what the committee has stated or the JSC has stated. So we are going to vote in favor of Judge President Hlophe being removed or impeached. They are certainly going to think about it, mule about it over a number of times. There can be another political influences that can come in. So I don't think it's going to be a sealed and done decision as one would think. There's still going to be a lot of debate which is going to take place, and certainly the independence of the judiciary, the independence of justice, the way in which these courts have been able to deliver their judgments, and a special focus on the Western Cape High Court is certainly going to be looked at by the parliamentarians when they take their decision. I think it's going to be a much more comprehensive and much more discussions which are going to take place around this, and certainly the independence of the judiciary, the independence of justice, and the manner in which they've been handling themselves is going to be under the spotlight.
Now, I mean, while of course the National Assembly will have to, look at this matter, and as you were saying, a resolution would have to be adopted by a 2/3 majority. There is something else that is also relevant, and that is that after the JSC informed the Speaker of the National Assembly of its decision, Judge Hlophe filed a review application and in the South Gauteng High Court, in other words, putting a halt to the parliamentary proceedings. And even though that application was dismissed by a full branch of the High Court, he filed an application for leave to appeal, which the SCA granted. Now, how is that going to impact the parliamentary proceedings?
You see, it's going to start now, as in after this particular decision was then handed over to Watchdog, because at the end of the day, he can even go back to court on an urgent basis and say, "Court, I need you to come to my corner in this case. Please come and save my rights. My rights have been infringed." You have a president who is taking a decision on something that has not been finalized as yet, and you're still going to be discussed in the JSE. And even if I lose at the JSE, I still have the constitutional court to go to. However, we have someone who's actioning a process that at the end of the day may still be overturned, because if you remove the element or the decision of the JSE, it then collapses the whole process that has been started by the president. So at the end of the day, he can go to on an urgent basis and say, "This is my right that has been infringed. I'm going to suffer irreparable harm if this process continues, because I don't even know how soon this matter is going to sit within the tables of Parliament. So if a decision is taken that I must be impeached, and then they look at the two-thirds majority, only to find out that the JSC report that they relied on has now been declared as irrelevant or unlawful. So at the end of the day, you can't really take on that matter while this particular issue is pending. Please house this process. Let the court process start and begin, and it's only then in which we're able to discuss this matter. Another element that you can throw in, the lapse of time from July up until now, he may insinuate that the president has been quiet. What informed or what has changed since July up until now? What information has come to light that it would warrant him to action these proceedings now, while those particular proceedings within this SCA and also maybe in the front court are still pending?
Well, we'll see what comes out of it. Let's leave it there for tonight. Mpumelelo Zigala, thanks very much for your time and insights trying to unpack that issue for us. The presidency announcing today that he has decided to suspend the Cape Judge President, John Hlophe, a matter that has been going on for about 10 years, as Mpumelelo was reminding us there. But of course, we will see what happens next. After this short ad break, we're going to look at all matters ANC. We'll look at the status of the youth as this conference approaches. The once militant young lions of the ANC, the Youth League, go into this conference with that reputation seemingly no longer the case. They no longer even have an organization. They'll be represented at that conference by the Youth League task team. I'll be joined by their convener in a moment. We'll also look at the utterances over the past 24 hours or so of the two women who still hope to topple Cyril Ramaphosa at that conference, what they have to say about the stance or their respective stances. Yesterday, one of them not being there in the national legislature when the voting was being undertaken, and the other one deciding to go against her party's orders. We'll hear from Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma as well as Ms. Nongceba Sisulu. All that coming up after the break. The ANC has indicated that the 5 MPs who voted with the opposition for the adoption of the Section 89 panel report will be reported to the party for defying the party line. The party voted overwhelmingly against the report, which found that President Cyril Ramaphosa may have violated his oath of office. This means that Parliament will not proceed with the report, as was indicated by the National Assembly Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, when she announced voting results.
A historic sitting with voting done physically via a roll call. The ANC had given its 230 members a mandate to vote against the report. At least 5 ANC MPs, including a cabinet minister, defied the party's instructions and voted for the adoption of the report, to a rousing applause from the opposition benches.
Dlamini Zuma, NC.
As a disciplined member of the ANC, I vote yes.
Mahumapilo, SOR.
I vote yes.
However, after voting was done, Thandi Mahambe-Hlala, who initially voted yes, wanted to change her vote. but some opposition parties objected.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. It came to my attention that my vote for party line is captured wrongly. Vote for party line is no.
Tourism Minister Lindiwe Sisulu decided not to take part in voting. She was present during the debate and left during voting.
Sisulu LN.
We have a party political system and people are here on the party list. Nobody contests a constituency, and therefore when we have discussions in the party and take decisions, they must be binding.
At least one political analyst believes that the timing of not towing the party line was not a wise decision for those who defied the party, as they might face unintended dire consequences for their actions.
Voting against the party line at a time that is so close to a conference of the party was not necessarily very thoughtful, because what's going to happen is that these members have opened themselves up to a potential to be purged after the ANC conference.
No opposition party indicated that it gave its members instructions on how to vote. However, no member from the opposition voted differently from their colleagues. Lulama Maitya, SABC News, Parliament.
Well, we've been trying to find out from some of the ANC MPs you saw there what they have to say for themselves for not having done what the party had instructed them to do. For her part, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma spoke to our international news editor, Sophie Mugwena, and this is what she had to say for herself.
Many people saying you actually defied the party position.
I didn't defy the party. I voted as a public representative in Parliament. But let's go back to the party. In the party, I'm an NEC member. In the NEC, issues like these should be debated exhaustively by everyone in the NEC before a conclusion is reached. That Monday, I think it was the 4th or something, a meeting took place. There were about 80 names that were pronounced that are going to speak, including my name. But somewhere at number 50-something, we're told there's a glimpse of the summary. Say, glimpse of the summary? No, it's not the summary, it's just a glimpse. Then the next thing, the meeting is stopped. And we protested. I'm one of the people who protested that no, you can't say this is a summary when more than 20 people haven't spoken. How do you know what they were going to say, and how do you know what the conclusion was going to be when they've spoken? We were ignored. Meeting was stopped abruptly. I actually went to the 3 leaders of the top 6. And I said, this is wrong. We must be given an opportunity to debate this matter, all of us. You can't give instructions when you haven't debated. We all believe in democratic centralism, but democratic centralism is not for a few. It's for all of us.
Well, of course, as many of you will know, she has made herself available for the position of party president come the weekend conference. But from the numbers that have been released by the ANC's electoral committee, she is trailing behind. So what's going to happen at the weekend? Take a listen to how she approached that particular question.
The ANC members during this nomination process, they failed to confirm women to be on the ballot in terms of higher positions, except the Deputy Secretary General position.
Yes, I think it's important that women should be in the top leadership. In reality, it should be 50-50, even in the officials. Because we may say officials are not a structure. They are the most important structure, actually, if you come to think of it. They decide the agenda, they decide the issues, they process the issues. So they are the most important structure. It's important that women are there. But we know that there is still patriarchy in the organization and in society. And it's for all the progressive members of the ANC to push that we should have enough women in the ANC. Because we can't boast of being free, as the late OR said, as a country, if women are not free. And if we are not, because what happens in the ANC is also mirrored in society, in business, in many other areas of human endeavor. Women must be part of every aspect of life, in every area of human endeavor.
Of course, South Africans were quick to remind Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma of something she once said, which they felt was important on the back of the stance she took yesterday. Take a listen to what she once said on this television channel.
The ANC is the most democratic organization. We debate and debate until we come to a view. But once we've come to a view, then all of us, irrespective of what your position was at the beginning of the debate, all of us, once a decision has been taken, must defend that decision.
Well. And what did Ms. Lindiwe Sisulu have to say for herself about her absence when it came to voting in Parliament yesterday?
We went to Parliament, and I took the opportunity to address caucus to say the impression that is being given by Comrade Gwede to them that all is normal is not true. I was held down. I could not continue. But I had stood up to say what is put across as having been a consensus in our meetings is not true. We were vigorously opposed to the way that the matter was being managed, and it was being managed to have a particular outcome. So after being held down in caucus, I went to the chamber and sat in the chamber. Then I get a message to say, look, you and Zweli, I think it's floating around. You and Zweli are being targeted. We suggest that you not vote. So I go out to go and check what this message is about. By the time I come back, the doors have been closed. I think, okay, either way, it doesn't matter. But the point that I'm putting across is that Parliament was held by the scruff of the neck to vote the way that it voted, at least not Parliament, the ANC, and it is wrong.
Minister Lindiwe Sisulu explaining her absence during voting yesterday afternoon. Staying with matters ANC, the once militant young lions of the ANC, the Youth League that is, go into this conference with that reputation seemingly no longer the case. Nongcaba Mhlawuli, the league's convener, joins me to reflect on the legacy of the league and the role it plays now within the ANC. Good evening. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Putfuyo, and thank you very much for having us.
Perhaps for our viewers, just clarity as to why the ANC Youth League goes into this conference without a structure, but a task team which you are the convener of?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, ideally, we would have wanted to have our national congress before the congress, the national conference of the ANC. In fact, our target had always been to have national congress of the Youth League before the ANC's 55th conference. We have, as this task team, done a considerable amount of work over the last 18 to 20 months or so. In actual fact, this task team has done more work in a shorter space of time than all other task teams before this one. We've launched all of the branches of the Youth League. We've launched over 90% of the regions, as well as a few provinces as well. And really the only outstanding thing that hampered our ability to host our national congress was the lack of financial resources. And the closer we got to the ANC's national conference, it then became quite clear that we were now competing with the mother body in terms of resources, and which is then where we then said that
the mother body doesn't have money, as we all know.
Well, I think it's no secret that the ANC has gone through a bit of a challenge insofar as financial resources are concerned. You would know that the league itself at some point was liquidated. In fact, when we came into office, the first thing we had to do was to rescind the liquidation of the Youth League, which is what we were able to do quite successfully. We were able to raise a bit of funds at the beginning of our time, and of course we then ended up having to use some of those funds in terms of operations. So we wanted to go to National Congress. We have not been able to go to National Congress, but in the last NEC meeting of the ANC, we actually said that we want to have National Congress at the latest by the end of Feb. And we believe that we will be able to do that when we get the ANC's 55th conference out of the way. We'll then be able to focus on all matters youth thereafter.
But are the ANC's young people organized? In other words, is what we're seeing, or how much of what we're seeing is because for the longest time, the ANC's young people have actually not been disorganized, and how much of it perhaps has to do with the ANC's own dysfunction? Because you've heard allegations, especially recently, from some members of the ANC, of the ANC NEC, who actually say that it's also the fact that the leagues, you know, are not functional is in itself, you know, caused by the ANC's own dysfunction as well.
I don't think that the word dysfunctionality is the correct one. I think
which one do you use?
I think all organizations, every organization, including the SABC for that matter, will have its own internal operational challenges as per the organ. And I think that the ANC as a liberation movement as well as a governing party is not different to that. And I think if you even study the history of liberation movements on the continent at the point at which the ANC is at right now, which is essentially a 30-year, between your 28 and 30-year mark in governance, you will see that there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot that we can learn from what happens to liberation movements that get into government at a particular point in which they are in government, and the ANC is no different to that. So there are a lot of challenges in terms of being an incumbent governing party. Things that the ANC, the literature, the challenges that the ANC is faced with, you'll find in every document of the ANC. The 54th conference had a whole diagnostic report around that, and I'm sure we saw that in policy conference as well, etc., etc. So the point that I'm trying to make is that we've just come out of a very successful policy conference in July. And that in itself was not a sign of dysfunctionality. We've launched branches. We've had successful nomination processes. The ANC, you know, we'll see in the organizational report that will be presented to conference in the next coming days, some of the campaigns that we've had as an organization. So the point really is that with all of our challenges, we are very much a functional organization, which is why we are going into the next in the next 2 days into our 55th National Conference, which we have no doubt will be a success.
Now, I mean, as a young person, I mean, you will no doubt be going to conference with your own aspirations.
Yeah.
Right. But you won't be carrying a mandate. In other words, to the extent that nobody sat, or the young people of the ANC didn't sit and say, this is what we want out of this conference as young people. I mean, isn't that going to be a burden for you?
Yes, so ideally, one would have wanted to carry a mandate from members of the Youth League in terms of policy. I mean, we've, going into the policy conference, for an example, we actually had extensive consultation meetings with not only structures of the Youth League, but as well as other PYA structures, which is your COSAS, your SASCO, your YCL, etc. We actually even developed a discussion document looking at all the discussion documents and developing policy proposals going into the policy conference. We did extensive amount of work insofar as constitutional amendments are concerned that will also be pushing going into this conference in the next couple of days. So in the absence of a constitutional mandate from our structures, we have tried to make do with what we have through consulting with our provinces and other sister organizations as well.
What has come out of that process, kind of, shall I say, overwhelmingly? In other words, that we should be pushing for.
So the one major thing is really that we want an organization that is younger, and we want a top leadership structure, which is the National Executive Committee, that is also younger. The ANC Youth League, you will remember in the 54th conference, demanded 40% youth representation in all structures of the organization. There was then something funny that happened in how that resolution was captured after conference, and now it's in dispute. We went to the policy conference with the same resolution that we put on the table. And if you actually look at the constitutional amendment document right now, there is actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's Amendment 40, 47 and 48, that speaks about a 30% constitutional amendment within the Constitution. So that's some of the things that we'll be pushing for, that we believe that, you know, if you do not become deliberate in affirming youth leadership within the highest decision-making body of the organization, you're never going to get to a point where you have a younger leadership of the ANC, because reality of the matter is that the membership of the ANC is quite young. You will see delegates going to this conference. Majority of them are young. I mean, members of the ANC Youth League are leading branches of the ANC Youth League. They're leading regions, they are, you know, in provincial structures. And even if you look at the outcomes of the NEC list, the list of 200, a lot of the, in fact, I think the top 20 is relatively younger. They might not be youth, but they're relatively younger. So that is an indication that, you know, we say that the hour of youth has struck, and that's an indication that the membership of the organization is yearning for a younger crop of leadership to take the organization forward.
But it doesn't look like, I mean, the ANC youth, I mean, the ANC leadership cares at all about that. I mean, look at the issue of women. I mean, it's a shame, isn't it, that if you look at the nominations for the top 6 officials now, it looks like only one woman may make it, certainly on the numbers that Khalima Motlanthe and his committee are put forward. So, and no one seems to care, in spite of the noises that are being made. So how much more a structure like yours, which, I mean, also doesn't have, you know, the actual muscle to be able to drive this, because you are a task team that has been, you know, handpicked. So there is no force, you know, behind your presence at conference.
I don't think that's true. I don't think it's true to say that there's no force behind our presence at conference. I mean, if you look at the NPC reports, actually, a lot of the resolutions that we're pushing for are actually part of what is going to be detailed or presented to national conferences as draft policy recommendations. I mean, for an example, one of the things that we put forward, and I'll come to your question in a second, was the issue of how, you know, do we define a branch in good standing? And we said, we need to relook at, if we're really going to talk about an organization that is alive, we need to have a different criteria of what becomes a branch in good standing. And that is actually what is being proposed in some of the constitutional amendments. But coming to even the issue of women representation, look, again, the policy conference actually said that we need to alter the election criteria to ensure that it's not just 50-50 in the entire structure, but you need the 50-50 gender representation in your top leadership as well, which will be your top 6. Well, and of course, branch nominations didn't give us that. And I think branch nominations are just that, they're a guide, and the highest decision-making body will be National Conference. And I think at National Conference, we really have an opportunity to correct that. In fact, we have, a responsibility to correct that, because it would really be an indictment on all of us, whether it's the Youth League, the Women's League, the ANC itself, the Veterans League, all of us, if we come out of this National Conference with only one woman in the top 6, when in fact we said we want a 50-50 split. So we do hope that there will be names that will be coming from the floor that will then stand for top 6 that are women who are currently not on the ballot, but also that are younger as well. Because if you in fact look at the nominations, even in terms of the generational question, there's an absence of that in itself.
But don't you add to the anomaly as well by treating people like your former leaders, like your Fikile Mbalulas, as representing you? Because I'm talking about 50-year-olds and who get your unqualified support, because they no longer represent young people. That's as a matter of fact.
I don't think there's a thing called unqualified support. As a start, I think that look, as the Youth League, we took an in-principle decision that will support all former leaders of the Youth League, particularly those who are recent graduates. And you would see that in the nomination outcomes, well, the list of additionals and that came out of our meeting in particular. So that's an in-principle decision that we've taken. And I don't think that anyone who supports anyone does it just because they like them. I think that any delegate who supports any candidate does that based on their belief in the candidate's ability, to lead the organization. I don't think that any support is unqualified for the basis of it just being support. I think it's based on my expectations as a member of the ANC, carrying a particular mandate from a branch of the ANC to vote for you to be a leader of the organization in order for us to, bring about the kind of change that we want to see in the organization. And we do believe that the issue of a younger crop of leadership, with the issue of a woman, the affirmation of women leadership, are things that really are non-negotiable going into this conference. And that is why we will be lobbying extensively to ensure that we have a different outcome from what you would have seen, particularly as it relates to the generational question, as well as the women leadership question in when the final election results are announced.
How much of both your, shall I call it, waning influence, but also the fact that you're not as jacked up as you once were, has to do with your your current generation Youth League having lost that militance? Because if you go back even to the days of your Mandelas, what kept the youth relevant was the fact that they could put on the table ideas, but they would not only put those ideas on the table, but they would actually fight for them. And I'm not talking militancy for the sake of militancy, but taking up particular issues.
We've taken up a lot of issues. I mean, for an example,
well, that appeal to young people, maybe I should add.
No, let me make an example. Let me make an example. I mean, as far back as early last year, as the ANC Youth League, we said that the Director must go. We actually marched
We're happy he's gone.
Well, we're very happy he's gone. In fact, we've been saying that it took way too long for him to leave. But the point that I'm trying to make is that as far back as a year ago, we said that we do not believe that the current CEO, as well as the COO, we're expecting him to leave as well, and the board are assisting the situation. We had a march to National Treasury where we, put forward particular demands insofar as, the economic condition of young people is concerned. We demanded for the then Minister of Finance, we need to go. But beyond that, we were not just saying those people must go, but we were stating the reasons why we believe that, they are not assisting our developmental agenda as a country. And today you have a director who's not there. Today you have a board that's not there. And we're very happy about the fact that the board isn't there, because we just felt that the previous board really was just doing the bidding of private interests on the ESCOM board. And we're looking forward to seeing more changes being made. And I'm making one example of a call that we made, and we went to the streets, we demanded it, but we also put forward new ideas in terms of what ought to happen, and we'll continue to advocate for those. And we are very confident that the kind of changes that we want we'll be able to see. And I'm making ESCOM as one but example of the work that this task team has done. I'm not discounting the fact that, look, ideally you would want to be, as you were saying, speaking from a position of having had that mandate coming from a national conference, and I've stated the reasons as to why it didn't happen. But we're also saying that we've actually done considerably well as a task team. But
you understand where I'm coming from, because if you look at the EFF, for example, one of its pillars is essentially what was a ANC Youth League program, and it just ran with it.
And what have they achieved?
Well, they have achieved membership. They've just registered more than 1 million members. They were posting about that a couple of weeks ago.
I think we should audit their membership. I think we should audit the validity of that membership. But anyway, we're not here to talk about them.
Okay, but anyway, we'll be there. We're going to continue with this conversation at conference. We'll be there throughout. Thank you very much, and best of luck.
Thank you so much.
And Madam Hlaulu is, of course, the convener of the Youth League task team. They're going into this conference as that task team, carrying, of course, the hopes and aspirations of young people belonging to the ANC. We'll see if indeed they will be making any inroads come the conference. To this now, the National Health Department is dealing with a measles outbreak. 137 cases have been registered in 4 provinces, and the number is rising. Should we be worried? And joining me now is acting DDG in the Department of Health, and that's Rampelane Morawane. Doc, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Should we be worried? Because it would seem, and I remember about a week ago, the minister said that he would really be worried if these numbers kept rising. And at the time, we were talking about only 1 province. We're talking about 4 provinces now, and 137 cases.
Good evening, Buyo, and thanks very much for having us. We reported the numbers that you have just stated. At the time, I don't know when, but when we reported to the minister, we already had the cases in 4 provinces. We had the cases in Limpopo, cases in Mpumalanga. We had just received notification of cases in Northwest, and the cases in Gauteng. So we've got 4 provinces that are affected. And the numbers are just going up steadily, but the concern obviously is that the majority of those cases that are going up is of people that have got no confirmed status of vaccination, meaning we have got no evidence that they were ever vaccinated. Therefore, the easiest assumption is that the bigger number of the people are people that have not been vaccinated. But we are watching the space. We having the situation under control to some extent, because our team is on the ground, supported by our agencies, NICD, National Institute of Communicable Diseases, supported by the World Health Organization. And in that regard, therefore, I would say to South Africans, we are having the situation under control, but do please come to the party by making sure that if you know that you have not been vaccinated or your children have not been vaccinated, take them to the nearest facility so that they can be vaccinated. I think, yes, the situation is as we have described it, but we do managing the situation.
Of course, I mean, what would be worrying for many people is that measles can actually be dangerous. They can be quite serious. Yes, a lot of people may suffer complications such as, ear infections, diarrhea, which many people may say aren't, that serious. But it goes all the way to things like pneumonia, doesn't it?
Yeah, look, it's the sad thing about the whole thing is that, yes, the complications you are listing are correct. Measles falls in the category of what we call vaccine preventable diseases. So, which means if people submit for vaccination, we should therefore not be having a crisis as this is about to become. So, we do call on South Africans and we do appreciate a platform such as this one, so that we're able to communicate the message to the public that go to the health facilities and make sure that you have your children vaccinated. And the teams on the ground, what they've done so far is to go into those affected provinces, go on with the vaccination of the eligible age groups to make sure that we interrupt the transmission of measles. But I do also want to just state that as we are going into the festive season or we've already started, the risk is even higher if people have not been vaccinated. So we need to be vigilant, particularly with our interprovincial travel, for holiday destinations, for migrant workers going to see their relatives at home, family members at home, but also as people are going to be engaging in festivities, parties at home, and when the schools come, reopen in January. So we're watching that space also. So we want to make sure that when people travel, they need to make sure that before they travel, they are certain that their children have been vaccinated, or they themselves have been vaccinated.
Of course, yes, I understand your emphasis on children, but from what you were saying earlier, that there are so many people who don't have records of whether, they were vaccinated or not. So what should adults also be looking out for by way of symptoms? And if they display those symptoms, what's the next step? What should people do?
The first thing should not even be to wait for the symptoms. If you're not sure about your vaccination status, or you know yourself that you've never been vaccinated, call onto the nearest health facility, primary health care clinics, and the nurses there will be able to help you. So there's not wait for the symptoms, because the symptoms, when the symptoms kick in, it means you are very late. It secondly means you are actually infectious, you'll infect other people. So therefore, do call up at the nearest facility. Health professionals will assist you. The symptoms, I can say to South Africans, that will be too late to wait for the symptoms. Go now. Let's rather err on the side of caution by calling onto the health facilities much earlier.
What should I expect at that facility? Let's say I don't know whether I was vaccinated or not. I do indeed go to a health facility. What should I expect to happen?
When you go into the health facilities and you've got no history, don't know your history, obviously you're regarded as somebody who has got no your status is regarded as an unknown status. If you are an unknown status, therefore, you're therefore eligible to receive a shot, right? So that, you don't go around infecting people in the event that you are not vaccinated. So that is why I say we always want to err on the side of caution. We don't want to really leave anything to chance. So calling up today, health practitioners will be able to clearly explain to you what must follow and be able to take necessary action.
Well, Doc, let's thank you for your time and hope that South Africans will indeed do the right thing. You heard it. You don't have to wait till you develop symptoms. It may well be too late. proactively go to a health facility and get yourself checked if indeed you are not sure whether you were vaccinated at all. And really, this is for your own good, because if one looks at some of the complications that may develop if you do indeed contract measles, it can be a worse situation. Remember, we're coming out of the COVID situation, and none of us would want to go back there. That's our show for tonight. Do, of course, join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.